I picked up my daughter-in-law's coat at the dry cleaners on a Tuesday afternoon. The owner looked at me with this strange expression and said something that made my blood run cold. What he told me changed everything I thought I knew about my family. If you're watching this video, give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my story from. I want to know how far this has reached. My name is Helen, and I'm 68 years old. I've lived in Sacramento my whole life, in the same house on Maple Street where my husband Thomas and I raised our son Michael. Thomas passed away 2 years ago from a heart attack, and since then, the house has felt too big, too quiet. Michael is my only child, and he married Jessica 5 years ago. She's a real estate agent, always impeccably dressed, always busy with her phone, always talking about her next big sale. I thought we had a good relationship, Jessica and I. Not warm exactly, but respectful, civil. She called me Mom Helen and smiled at family dinners. She brought wine and those fancy cheese boards from Trader Joe's. She complimented my cooking, though I noticed she rarely ate much of it. Thomas used to say I was too suspicious, that I saw problems where there weren't any. "You're looking for shadows, Helen," he'd tell me, kissing my forehead. "Jessica's just young and ambitious. Give her time." But Thomas wasn't here anymore to tell me I was overthinking things. It was late October, one of those California autumn days where the air finally gets a little crisp and you can smell wood smoke from someone's fireplace. I was coming back from my weekly volunteering shift at Lincoln Elementary, where I help second graders with their reading. I love those kids, the way their faces light up when they finally sound out a difficult word. It makes me feel useful, like I still have something to give. Jessica had called me that morning, her voice bright and rushed as always. "Mom, Helen, could you do me a huge favor? I have back-to-back showings today, and I completely forgot to pick up my winter coat from Sunset Cleaners. Could you grab it for me? I'll stop by tonight to get it. You're a lifesaver." I didn't mind. It gave me something to do, a reason to feel needed. The Cleaners was just 3 blocks from the elementary school anyway, in that little strip mall next to the hardware store and the Vietnamese restaurant. I'd been going there for years. Mr. Chen, the owner, knew me by name. He'd cleaned Thomas's suits for decades, and after Thomas died, Mr. Chen had given me this sad, understanding look every time I came in. He never said much, but his kindness was in the careful way he folded everything, in the extra starch he put in my blouses without charging me. The bell above the door chimed when I walked in. The shop smelled like steam and detergent and that particular chemical scent of dry cleaning fluid. Mr. Chen was behind the counter, sorting through plastic-wrapped garments on the motorized rack. He was in his 70s, thin and wiry, with silver hair and reading glasses that were always sliding down his nose. "Mrs. Patterson," he said, looking up with a smile. "Good afternoon. What can I do for you?" "I'm here to pick up my daughter-in-law's coat," I said, pulling out my phone to check Jessica's text. "Jessica Patterson." She said it should be ready. Something shifted in Mr. Chen's expression. It was subtle, just a slight tightening around his eyes, a hesitation in his movements. He turned to the rack and began flipping through the hanging clothes more slowly than usual. "Ah, yes," he said quietly. "The cream-colored wool coat. Very expensive. Max Mara." "That sounds right," I said, watching him. There was something odd in his tone, something I couldn't quite place. He pulled the coat from the rack, and I could see it through the clear plastic. Elegant, tailored, the kind of thing Jessica would wear. He laid it carefully on the counter, but didn't hand it to me right away. Instead, he stood there, his fingers resting on the plastic, his gaze fixed somewhere past my shoulder. "Mrs. Patterson," he said slowly, "may I ask you something?" "Of course." He glanced toward the door, as if checking that we were alone. The shop was empty except for us. Outside, I could hear the distant sound of traffic on Fair Oaks Boulevard. "How well do you know your daughter-in-law?" he asked. The question startled me. Well, she's married to my son." "Why do you ask?" Mr. Chen's jaw tightened. He pushed his glasses up his nose and looked directly at me for the first time since I'd walked in. "Because she brings many coats here, many expensive coats, but they're never hers." I felt my stomach drop. "What do you mean?" "The names," he said, pointing to a small tag attached to the plastic wrap. "When people bring clothes, I write their name on the tag. Look." I leaned closer. Written in Mr. Chen's neat handwriting was a name I didn't recognize. Victoria Ashford. "This coat," Mr. Chen continued, his voice low and careful, It was brought in 3 weeks ago by your daughter-in-law, but she told me it belonged to Victoria Ashford. She said Mrs. Ashford was a client of hers, very wealthy, too busy to pick up her own dry cleaning. She said she was doing her a favor. He paused. But Mrs. Ashford called here last week, very upset. She said she never authorized Jessica Patterson to pick up her belongings. She said some things were missing from her home. My hands were shaking. I gripped the edge of the counter to steady myself. Missing? What do you mean, missing? Mr. Chen's expression was pained, like he regretted starting this conversation but couldn't stop now. I don't know all the details, but Mrs. Ashford was very angry. She said Jessica Patterson had access to her house to stage it for sale, and when Mrs. Ashford returned from vacation, several items were gone. Jewelry, a watch, some designer handbags. He tapped the coat gently. And this coat. I couldn't breathe properly. The shop suddenly felt too warm, too small. Are you saying Jessica stole these things? I'm saying, Mr. Chen said carefully, that I've been doing this job for 40 years. I know when something isn't right. Your daughter-in-law has brought in 8 different coats in the past 2 months. 8, all expensive, all with different names on the tickets. She always says the same thing, that she's helping her clients, that they're too busy, that she's just being nice. He looked at me with something like pity. But Mrs. Ashford wasn't the first person to call here looking for their things. The floor felt unsteady beneath my feet. I thought about Jessica's immaculate wardrobe, the designer handbags she carried, the expensive jewelry I'd seen her wear. Michael didn't make enough money to afford those things, not on his teacher's salary. And Jessica's commissions were good, sure, but not that good. I'd always assumed she was just savvy with money, good at finding sales, maybe a little vain but harmless. Why are you telling me this? I whispered. Mr. Chen's eyes were sad behind his glasses. Because you're a good person, Mrs. Patterson. You've been coming to my shop for 30 years. When Mr. Patterson died, you were kind to me even in your grief. You remembered my wife's name when she was sick. You brought soup. He pushed the coat toward me slowly. I don't want to see you hurt, but I think you should know what kind of person is in your family. I stared at the coat, at the name that wasn't Jessica's written in careful letters on the tag. Victoria Ashford, a stranger whose expensive belongings were now hanging in my daughter-in-law's closet, cleaned and pressed and ready to wear like they'd always belonged to her. Did you call the police? I asked, my voice barely audible. I suggested Mrs. Ashford do that, Mr. Chen said, but she said she wanted to handle it privately. She said she didn't want the publicity, didn't want it affecting her reputation in the community. She's in the middle of a divorce, apparently. Complications. He shook his head. But there were others. A woman named Patricia Brennan called 2 weeks ago. Another named Susan Martinez. They all said the same thing. Items missing after Jessica Patterson had access to their homes. I picked up the coat with numb fingers. The plastic crinkled in my hands. Through it, I could see the perfect cream wool, the satin lining, the Max Mara label. $1,200 probably, maybe more. And it belonged to someone else. Someone Jessica had stolen from. Thank you, I managed to say, though my voice sounded strange even to my own ears. Thank you for telling me. Mr. Chen nodded slowly. I hope I did the right thing. But Mrs. Patterson, be careful. People who steal like this, who smile while they take from others. He trailed off, but I understood what he meant. They're dangerous. Not because they're violent, but because they're convincing. Because they make you doubt your own eyes. I walked out of Sunset Cleaners in a daze, the coat draped over my arm like evidence. The afternoon sunshine felt too bright, almost aggressive. I stood on the sidewalk for a long moment, watching cars pass on Fair Oaks, watching people go about their normal lives while mine tilted sideways. Jessica was coming to my house tonight to pick up this coat, this stolen coat. She'd smile at me, thank me for the favor, probably stay for tea and small talk about her latest showing. She'd sit in my kitchen, in the chair where Thomas used to sit, and she'd lie to my face the way she'd apparently been lying for months. And my son, Michael, did he know? Was he part of this? Or was he as blind as I'd been, seeing only what Jessica wanted him to see? I started walking back to my car, my mind racing. The elementary school playground was visible from where I stood, the swings moving gently in the breeze, empty now that the children had gone home. I thought about those second graders I tutored, how their faces showed every emotion so clearly, joy, frustration, pride, confusion. When had I lost the ability to read the people closest to me? When had I stopped paying attention to the shadows Thomas always said I imagined? Maybe I'd been right all along. Maybe there were shadows, and maybe they'd been growing darker right in front of me while I chose to look away. I got in my car and sat there for a moment. The coat laid carefully across the passenger seat. Through the plastic, I could see a small stain on the collar that Mr. Chen had carefully treated. Someone else's lipstick, probably. Victoria Ashford's lipstick on Victoria Ashford's expensive coat, soon to be hanging in Jessica's closet as if it had always been hers. My phone buzzed. A text from Jessica. Still on for tonight? 6-ish? Can't wait to get my coat back. I stared at that message for a long time, thinking about masks and performances and all the ways people pretend to be something they're not. I texted back, 6 o'clock. I'll have dinner ready. Because I needed to see her face when she picked up this coat. I needed to watch her eyes when she touched it. Needed to see if there was any flicker of guilt or fear or anything human underneath that perfect real estate agent smile. And I needed to decide what I was going to do with what Mr. Chen had told me. The truth is a funny thing. Sometimes it breaks everything. Sometimes it's the only thing that can fix what's already broken. I drove home slowly, the stolen coat beside me like a passenger, like a secret, like a bomb waiting to go off. I spent the rest of the afternoon in a strange fog, moving through my house like a ghost in my own life. I made chicken piccata, one of Michael's favorites from childhood, though I wasn't sure if he was coming with Jessica or if she'd arrive alone. My hands moved automatically, pounding the chicken breasts thin, dredging them in flour, heating the olive oil in the cast-iron skillet Thomas had given me for our 20th anniversary. The coat hung on the back of my dining room chair, still in its plastic wrap. I kept glancing at it while I cooked, as if it might somehow explain itself, as if the truth might become less terrible if I looked at it long enough. It didn't. At 5:45, I set the table. 2 places, not 3. I had a feeling Michael wouldn't be coming. Jessica always had a way of visiting me alone, of creating these little pockets of time where it was just the two of us. I used to think she was making an effort, trying to build a relationship with me separate from my son. Now I wondered if there was another reason. If it was easier to lie to me without Michael there as a witness. The doorbell rang at exactly 6 o'clock. Jessica was always punctual. I dried my hands on a kitchen towel and walked to the front door, my heart beating hard against my ribs. Through the frosted glass panel, I could see her silhouette, tall, slim, perfectly put together as always. I opened the door. Mom, Helen. Jessica's smile was brilliant. All white teeth and glossy lips. She was wearing a black pantsuit that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill. Her dark hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. Something smells amazing. You didn't have to make dinner. It's no trouble, I said, stepping back to let her in. Just chicken piccata. My favorite, she said, though I was fairly certain she'd never said that before. She kissed my cheek. A quick brush of expensive perfume and cold air from outside. You're too good to me. I watched her carefully as she walked into my living room. The way she moved with such confidence, such ease, like she belonged everywhere she went, like the whole world was just a stage set up for her benefit. Your coat is in the dining room, I said. Perfect. She followed me through the house, her heels clicking on the hardwood floors. When she saw the coat hanging there, her face lit up with genuine pleasure. Oh, thank God. I've been freezing all week. This weather, you know? Can't decide if it's fall or still summer. She reached for the coat, and I watched her hands, manicured, steady, completely calm. She pulled it from the plastic wrap with the kind of care you'd give something precious, something that truly belonged to you. Mr. Chen does such good work, she said, holding the coat up to examine it. Look at this. Perfect. Not a spot on it. He mentioned you've been bringing a lot of coats to him lately, I said, keeping my voice light, conversational. Jessica's hands paused for just a fraction of a second. Then she laughed, that easy, musical laugh she used at dinner parties. Oh, did he? Yeah, I've been helping some of my clients with errands. You know how it is with these wealthy people. They want full service. They're paying me to sell their multi-million-dollar homes, so if they need me to pick up dry cleaning or arrange for grocery delivery or whatever, I do it. It's all part of the job. She folded the coat over her arm and smiled at me. Besides, it's good for business. They tell their friends how helpful I am, and boom, more referrals. It sounded so reasonable, so logical. If I hadn't talked to Mr. Chen, if I hadn't seen that name on the tag, Victoria Ashford, I would have believed her completely. That's smart, I said. Going the extra mile. Exactly. She hung the coat carefully over the back of a chair. Now should we eat? I'm starving, and that chicken smells incredible. We sat down at the dining room table, in the same spots where Jessica and Michael usually sat during family dinners. I served the chicken, the pasta with lemon caper sauce, the roasted asparagus. Normal things? Ordinary things. As if this were just another pleasant evening and not an interrogation disguised as a meal. Jessica ate with enthusiasm, complimenting everything, telling me about a house she'd just listed in East Sacramento, a Victorian with original hardwood and a renovated kitchen. It's going to go for at least $900,000, she said. Maybe more. The market is crazy right now. I made appropriate sounds, asked appropriate questions, but I was watching everything. The way she cut her chicken into precise small pieces, the way she touched her napkin to her lips after every few bites, the way her eyes kept drifting to that cream-colored coat draped over the chair. "How is Michael?" I asked, because he was my son, and I realized I hadn't talked to him in over a week. "Oh, he's good. Busy with school stuff, you know. Parent-teacher conferences coming up." She waved her fork vaguely. "He works too hard. I keep telling him he needs to take better care of himself." "You both work hard," I said. "Well, somebody has to pay for all this." She gestured around my modest dining room, and for a moment I wasn't sure what she meant. Then she laughed again. That same easy sound. "I mean our lifestyle. The house payment, the cars, all of it. Teaching doesn't exactly make you rich." There was something sharp underneath her words, something that made me sit up a little straighter. "Michael loves teaching," I said. "I know he does, and I love that about him." But her tone suggested she loved it less than she claimed. "It's just, sometimes I wish he was a little more ambitious, you know? A little more driven." I thought about my son, who spent his evenings grading papers and his weekends planning lessons for his high school English students, who called his students by name and knew which ones were struggling at home and which ones just needed someone to believe in them, who was exactly like his father, kind, steady, content with a life built on meaning rather than money. "He's ambitious about the things that matter," I said quietly. Jessica's smile tightened just a little. "Of course, I didn't mean, look, I adore Michael. You know that. I just sometimes think we could have more if we both pushed a little harder." "More what?" I asked. She looked at me like the answer was obvious. "More everything. A bigger house, better cars, nice vacations. The things successful people have." I set down my fork. "Is that what you think success is? Don't you?" She leaned back in her chair, studying me with those sharp, calculating eyes. "I mean, look at this house, Mom Helen. It's lovely, it really is. But it's the same house you've lived in for 40 years. Same furniture, same dishes, same everything. Don't you ever want more?" I thought about Thomas, about the life we'd built in this house, about Michael's first steps in that living room, about birthday parties and Christmas mornings and quiet Sunday afternoons reading the newspaper together, about the garden Thomas planted in the backyard, the roses he babied every spring. "I have everything I need," I said. Jessica made a small sound that might have been a laugh or a sigh. "That's very zen of you, but I'm not wired that way. I want things, nice things. I work hard, so why shouldn't I have them?" "You should," I said carefully. "As long as they're yours to have." Something flickered across her face, too quick to name, there and gone in an instant. "What do you mean?" "I mean you should buy things with money you've earned, not with other people's things." The air in the dining room changed. Jessica went very still, her fork suspended halfway to her mouth. When she set it down, the sound of metal on china was too loud in the silence. "That's an odd thing to say," she said softly. "Is it?" I met her eyes. "Mr. Chen told me something interesting today." I watched the color drain from her face, watched her jaw tighten. For 3 long seconds, she said nothing. Then she laughed, but it wasn't her usual easy laugh. This one was harder, sharper. "Oh God, not this again." She pressed her fingers to her temples like she had a headache. "Let me guess. Some client called the cleaners, confused about their clothes?" "This happens all the time, Mom Helen. I pick up dry cleaning for busy clients, and sometimes there's a mix-up with the tickets. It's not a big deal. Mr. Chen said 3 different women have called looking for their belongings. He said you told him you were helping them, but they said items were missing from their homes after you'd been there. Jessica stood up so abruptly her chair scraped against the floor. Are you actually accusing me of something right now? I'm asking you to explain. Explain what? That I'm good at my job? That I go above and beyond for my clients, and sometimes they're ungrateful or confused or trying to get out of paying their bills? Her voice rose. Do you have any idea how hard I work? How much I do for Michael? For us? For this family? What family? I asked quietly. You haven't given Michael children. You barely spend time with him. You visit me alone, and now I'm wondering why. Her face went cold. Wow, okay. So this is what we're doing now. You're going to judge my marriage, my choices, based on what? Some gossip from a dry cleaner? It's not gossip if it's true. It's not true. She grabbed her purse from where she'd set it on the side table. You know what? I don't need this. I came here for my coat and a nice dinner, and instead I get accused of, what exactly? Stealing? From my own clients? That coat, I said, pointing to where it still hung on the chair. It belongs to Victoria Ashford, not to you. Jessica froze. Her hand was on her purse, her body angled toward the door, but she froze completely at that name. Mrs. Ashford is letting me borrow it, she said, but her voice had lost its conviction. Then why did she call Mr. Chen looking for it? Jessica's mouth opened and closed. I could see her mind working, searching for the right lie, the right explanation. But I'd surprised her, and she couldn't find solid ground. I'm returning it, she finally said. Next week. She knows I have it. This is a misunderstanding. What about Patricia Brennan's things? Susan Martinez's? I don't know who those people are. They're your clients, Jessica. Or they were. She grabbed the coat with both hands, clutching it to her chest like a shield. I'm leaving. And when Michael hears about this conversation, about you accusing me of... Does Michael know? I asked. About any of this? That stopped her. She stood there in my dining room. This woman my son had married, this stranger I'd welcomed into my family. Her eyes were bright with something that might have been tears or might have been rage. You have no idea what you're talking about, she whispered. No idea what it takes to survive in this world. People like you, who've never had to fight for anything, who've never had to make hard choices, you don't get to judge me. I'm not judging you, I said. I'm asking you to tell me the truth. The truth? She laughed bitterly. The truth is that I'm the only reason Michael has any kind of decent life. The truth is that his teacher salary barely covers groceries. The truth is that I do what I have to do to give us the life we deserve. And there it was. Not a confession exactly, but close enough. By stealing from people who trust you, I said. By being smart, she shot back. By seeing opportunities and taking them. These women have so much money they don't even notice when a coat or a handbag goes missing. They have closets full of things they never wear, jewelry they've forgotten they own. I'm not hurting anyone. You're hurting them. You're hurting Michael. You're hurting yourself. She shook her head, backing toward the door. I don't expect you to understand. You're from a different generation, where people were satisfied with nothing. Well, I'm not satisfied. I want more, and I'm going to have it. Even if it means losing everything? I asked. She paused at the front door, her hand on the knob. I won't lose anything, Mom, Helen. Because you're not going to say a word about this. Why wouldn't I? She turned to look at me, and her smile was cold. Because if you do, if you tell Michael or anyone else about these ridiculous accusations, I'll make sure everyone knows what a bitter, jealous old woman you are. I'll tell Michael you're getting confused in your old age, that you're making up stories because you can't stand seeing us happy, and he'll believe me, because he loves me, and because you're just his mother. And mothers always think no one is good enough for their sons. Then she left, taking the stolen coat with her, leaving me alone in my dining room with 2 plates of half-eaten dinner and the sinking realization that I was up against something much bigger and darker than I'd imagined. I sat there for a long time after she left, listening to the silence of my empty house. Then I picked up my phone and did something I hadn't done in 2 years. I called my husband's lawyer. Richard Morrison had been Thomas's lawyer for 30 years. He'd handled our wills, the paperwork when we bought the house, some minor business issues with the contracting company Thomas worked for. He was 63 now, with silver hair and the kind of calm, measured voice that made you feel like everything could be figured out, given enough time and the right documents. I called him the morning after Jessica left, after a sleepless night spent staring at the ceiling and trying to understand how I'd missed so much for so long. "Helen," Richard said warmly when his secretary put me through. "It's good to hear from you. How are you holding up?" "I need your help," I said, and then everything spilled out. Mr. Chen's revelation, the coat with Victoria Ashford's name on it, the other women who'd called looking for their belongings, Jessica's half-confession in my dining room, her threat to paint me as a confused old woman if I said anything. Richard was quiet for a long moment after I finished. I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line, the soft scratch of a pen on paper as he took notes. "This is serious, Helen," he finally said. "If what you're telling me is accurate, your daughter-in-law is committing theft and potentially fraud. These aren't minor offenses." "I know," my voice cracked, "but I don't know what to do. If I go to Michael, she'll turn him against me. If I go to the police without proof, it's just my word against hers. And she's very convincing. Do you want to protect her?" Richard asked gently. "Or do you want to stop her?" I closed my eyes. "I want to protect my son." "Those might be the same thing," he said. "If Jessica is stealing from clients, it's only a matter of time before she gets caught. And when she does, Michael's reputation will be damaged too. His career, his life, everything he's built will be tainted by association. What should I do?" "First, we need evidence. Real, concrete evidence. Not just Mr. Chen's observations, though those are helpful. We need documentation, financial records, if possible. Proof that she's selling stolen items or using them herself." He paused. "How much access do you have to their life? Their house, their papers?" "Not much," I admitted. "They live in Granite Bay, about 30 minutes from here. I've visited maybe a dozen times since they bought the place 3 years ago. Jessica doesn't really encourage drop-ins." "What about Michael? Does he talk to you about their finances?" I thought about the last few conversations I'd had with my son. Brief phone calls, mostly about his students or his lesson plans. He never mentioned money problems, but he never mentioned money at all. "No," I said. "He's private about that. Or maybe Jessica keeps him in the dark too." "That's possible," Richard said. "If she's hiding this from her clients, she's probably hiding it from him. The question is whether the hiding is active deception or just omission. What's the difference? Intent and liability." He sighed. "Look, Helen, I can make some quiet inquiries. I know some people in the real estate community, and I can ask around about Jessica without being obvious about it. But in the meantime, I need you to do something for me." "What?" "Write down everything. Every detail you remember from your conversation with Mr. Chen, from your dinner with Jessica, from any other interactions that seemed off. Dates, times, exact words if you can remember them. We're building a case here, even if it never goes to court. We need a timeline." "Okay," I said, reaching for the notepad I kept by the phone. "I can do that. And Helen? Be careful. If Jessica thinks you're investigating her, if she feels cornered," he trailed off, but I understood. Cornered animals bite. "I will," I promised. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and started writing. The notepad filled up quickly. 2 pages, then 3, then 4. I wrote about the coat, about Jessica's 2 nice compliments and 2 expensive clothes, about the way she'd looked at my house like it was a prison instead of a home. I wrote about her coldness when I'd confronted her, the way she'd threatened me so casually, as if destroying my relationship with my son was just another business transaction. And I wrote about the things I'd noticed over the years, but dismissed. The time Jessica showed up to Thanksgiving dinner wearing a diamond bracelet I'd never seen before, claiming it was a gift from a grateful client. The designer handbag she'd carried to Thomas's funeral, insisting she'd gotten it on sale, even though I'd seen the same bag at Nordstrom for $4,000. The way she always had a story, always had an explanation, always made you feel slightly foolish for questioning her. Thomas would have told me I was looking for shadows again, but Thomas was gone, and the shadows were real. My phone rang while I was on my 5th page of notes. I almost didn't answer when I saw Michael's name on the screen. My heart stuttered with guilt and fear and love all tangled together. "Hi, sweetheart," I said, trying to sound normal. "Mom." His voice was tight, controlled. "Jessica told me about last night." "Of course she did." I set down my pen. "What did she tell you?" "That you accused her of stealing. That you got some crazy story from the dry cleaner and decided she was a criminal." He sounded hurt, more than angry. "Mom, what's going on? That's not like you." "Michael, I need you to listen to me." "No, Mom, I need you to listen. Jessica is my wife. She's been nothing but good to you, to us, to everyone. And you thank her by calling her a thief? I didn't call her anything, I said carefully. I asked her questions about some concerning information I received. That's all. From a dry cleaner, he said, and I could hear Jessica's words in his phrasing. A man you've known for years suddenly decides to gossip about my wife, and you just believe him? It wasn't gossip, Michael. It was fact. 3 different women called that cleaners looking for belongings that Jessica had access to. One of them was a coat I personally picked up, a coat with someone else's name on the ticket. Jessica explained that. It was a mix-up. She was helping a client, and the woman got confused about which coat was which. Is that what she told you? Yes, and I believe her. His voice hardened. Why wouldn't I? She's my wife. She's the person I chose to spend my life with. And you're treating her like what? I asked softly. He was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was raw. Like you never wanted me to marry her in the first place. That hit me hard because it was partially true. Not that I hadn't wanted him to marry Jessica specifically, but that I'd had doubts. Quiet, nagging doubts I'd never voiced because I didn't want to be that mother. The one who thought no one was good enough for her son. Michael, I want you to be happy, I said. That's all I've ever wanted. But happiness built on lies. Stop. Just stop. He exhaled sharply. Look, I'm calling because Jessica is really upset. She's been crying all morning. She says you made her feel like a criminal in her own family, and I can't have that. I can't have you attacking her. I'm not attacking her. I'm trying to protect you. From what? From my own wife? He laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. You know what I think? I think you're lonely, Mom. I think you've been lonely since Dad died, and instead of dealing with that, you're creating drama where there isn't any. I felt something crack inside my chest. You think I'm making this up? I think you're confused. Or maybe you need to talk to someone, a therapist or something, because this isn't normal behavior. And there it was, Jessica's prediction coming true. She'd gotten to him first, shaped the narrative, made me the villain. And my son, my sweet boy who I'd raised to be trusting and kind, believed her. Michael, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. I love you. You're my son, and I will always love you. But I'm not confused, and I'm not lonely, and I'm not making this up. Something is wrong with Jessica, and sooner or later, you're going to see it. The only thing wrong is this conversation. He sighed. I need to go. I have a faculty meeting. But Mom, please, just leave Jessica alone. If you can't be supportive, then at least don't be destructive. He hung up before I could respond. I sat there holding my silent phone, feeling like I'd just lost something precious and irreplaceable. Not Michael himself. He was still alive, still out there in the world, but some essential connection between us, some trust that had always been there, had frayed and broken. Jessica had done exactly what she'd threatened to do. She'd turned my son against me with a few well-placed tears and the right story. I looked down at my pages of notes, at all the careful documentation Richard had told me to create. It felt suddenly pointless. What good was evidence if the person you were trying to save refused to listen? But then I thought about Mr. Chen's sad eyes when he'd told me about the missing items, about Victoria Ashford and Patricia Brennan and Susan Martinez, women I'd never met but who were victims just the same, about all the future clients Jessica would steal from if no one stopped her. And I thought about Michael, about the kind of man Thomas and I had raised him to be, honest, principled, good. What would it do to him when he finally learned the truth about the woman he'd married? How would it shatter him to realize he'd been defending a thief, living off stolen goods, building a life on lies? I picked up my pen and kept writing. That afternoon, I drove to the library and used their computers to do something I should have done years ago. I searched for Jessica's name online, looking for any trace of her life before she'd married Michael. What I found was interesting. Jessica Marie Patterson, formerly Jessica Marie Hartley, had worked for 3 different real estate companies in the past 8 years. Not unusual in itself. Agents moved around, following better commissions and bigger opportunities. But the pattern was striking. She'd started at Miller & Associates in Roseville, stayed for 18 months, then moved to Baxter Realty in Folsom for 2 years, then to her current position at Prestige Properties in Sacramento. I dug deeper, searching for reviews and testimonials. Most were glowing. Jessica was charming, efficient, got results. But there were a few odd ones buried in the comments sections of real estate forums. A woman in Roseville mentioned that some jewelry had gone missing after her agent staged her home, though she couldn't prove anything. A man in Folsom said his mother's engagement ring disappeared during an open house, but the police found no evidence of theft. Nothing concrete, nothing you could take to court. Just a pattern of missing items following Jessica like a shadow. I printed out everything I found and added it to my growing file. That evening, Richard called me back. I made some calls, he said, discreetly. And Helen, your instincts were right. There's talk in the real estate community about Jessica. Nothing official, no formal complaints, but whispers. Agents warning each other to watch their clients' belongings when Jessica is involved in a deal. One broker told me off the record that she's brilliant at her job, closes deals, makes money, but that she gives people an uncomfortable feeling. That's not enough to prove anything, I said. No, he agreed. But it establishes a pattern. If this goes to trial, it won't go to trial, I interrupted. Michael thinks I'm confused or lonely or making things up. Jessica has him completely fooled. Then we need to unfool him, Richard said simply. And I think I know how. I waited. We set a trap, he said. A controlled situation where Jessica's behavior can be documented clearly, without question. But Helen, it requires you to trust me and to be patient. Can you do that? I thought about my son's voice on the phone, about the crack in our relationship that Jessica had created. I thought about all the women she'd stolen from and all the ones she would steal from if she wasn't stopped. Yes, I said. Tell me what to do. Richard's plan was elegant in its simplicity. We would create a situation where Jessica couldn't resist taking something, and we'd have witnesses to document it. I have a client, Richard explained over coffee at his office 3 days later. Margaret Whitmore. She's 76, recently widowed, and she needs to sell her house in East Sacramento. It's a beautiful property, 4 bedrooms, original craftsman details, probably worth about $1.2 million. She's been interviewing real estate agents. And you want her to interview Jessica, I said, understanding immediately. Exactly. Margaret knows the situation. She's willing to help. We'll stage the house with some specific items, expensive but traceable. A vintage Cartier watch that belonged to her late husband. A pair of diamond earrings. A designer handbag. All of it documented, photographed, serial numbers recorded. He leaned forward. Margaret will hire Jessica to list the house, and then we'll see what happens. What if she doesn't take anything? I asked. What if she's more careful now, after our confrontation? Then we'll know she's learned her lesson. And maybe that's enough. Richard's expression was serious. But Helen, people like Jessica, they don't stop. They can't. The compulsion is too strong, especially if she thinks she's gotten away with it. If she believes she's fooled everyone, including you and Michael. How long will this take? A few weeks. Maybe. Margaret needs to sell anyway, so it's not a setup in the legal sense. It's a legitimate business transaction. Jessica will have access to the house for staging, for showings, for open houses, plenty of opportunities. And Margaret will keep careful inventory of everything. I felt sick to my stomach. And if Jessica does take something, what then? Then we have proof, Richard said simply. Real, documented, undeniable proof. And then you can go to Michael with something more than accusations. You can show him the truth. I agreed because I didn't see another choice. Margaret Whitmore called Jessica's office the next day. I wasn't there for the conversation, but Richard told me later that Jessica had been enthusiastic, professional, eager for the listing. They'd scheduled a meeting for the following Tuesday. The waiting was excruciating. I tried to go about my normal life. My volunteering at the elementary school, my book club meetings, my garden. But everything felt hollow and strange. Michael didn't call. I wanted to reach out to him, to hear his voice. But I was afraid of pushing him further away. Jessica posted about the new listing on her social media. I saw it because I'd started following her accounts, something I'd never done before. The photos showed Margaret's beautiful craftsman house, all warm wood and period details. Excited to represent this stunning East Sacramento property, Jessica had written. A true gem for the discerning buyer. The comments were full of praise and interest. Jessica's professional mask was perfect. 2 weeks went by. Then 3. Richard called me every few days with updates. Jessica was doing her job well, bringing potential buyers, staging the rooms beautifully, hosting open houses on Sunday afternoons. Margaret reported that Jessica was charming, attentive, knowledgeable about the market. Nothing's missing yet, Richard told me on a Thursday evening. Margaret checks the inventory every night. Everything's still there. I felt a confusing mix of relief and disappointment. Maybe I had been wrong. Maybe Jessica had stopped. Maybe. Then Richard called again the next Monday morning. His voice was tight. It happened, he said. The watch is gone. My hand tightened on the phone. Are you sure? Margaret noticed it yesterday. She'd left it on the dresser in the master bedroom. We'd discussed keeping it visible. Tempting. It was there Sunday morning before the open house. By Sunday evening, it was gone. And Jessica was the only agent who had access to the house that day. Could it have been a visitor at the open house? Margaret had a friend there helping, monitoring everyone who came through. No one went into the master bedroom alone. But Jessica did. She said she needed to adjust the curtains, make sure the lighting was right. She was in there for maybe 5 minutes. 5 minutes to destroy everything. What do we do now? I asked. Now we call the police, Richard said. But first, I need to talk to Margaret. Make sure she's comfortable pressing charges. And Helen, you need to tell Michael before he hears it from someone else. I drove to Michael's house that afternoon. He lived in Granite Bay in one of those modern developments where all the houses look vaguely Mediterranean and the lawns are maintained by professional services. I'd only been there a handful of times. Jessica always preferred meeting at restaurants or having me host at my place. The house was big, too big for 2 people, probably 3,000 square feet, with a 3-car garage and a pool in the back. I'd asked Michael once how they afforded it on his salary, and he'd said Jessica's commissions were good. I hadn't pushed further. Now I wondered how much of this house was paid for with stolen goods. I rang the doorbell and waited, my heart hammering. Through the frosted glass, I saw a shadow approaching. The door opened, and Jessica stood there in yoga pants and a cashmere sweater, her hair in a casual ponytail. She looked surprised to see me. "Mom, Helen," she said, and her voice was carefully neutral. "This is unexpected." "Is Michael home?" I asked. "He's at a department meeting. Won't be back until 6. She didn't invite me in, just stood there blocking the doorway. "What do you need?" "I need to talk to you," I said. Privately. Something shifted in her expression. Wariness, maybe, or calculation. "I don't think that's a good idea." Michael was pretty clear about boundaries after last time. "This isn't about boundaries. This is about Margaret Whitmore's house." I watched the color drain from her face, watched her eyes go sharp and cold. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then she stepped back and opened the door wider. "Come in," she said quietly. I followed her through the immaculate house, everything white and gray and perfectly decorated, like a showroom, to the kitchen. She didn't offer me coffee or tea, just stood on the opposite side of the marble island and waited. "How do you know Margaret Whitmore?" she finally asked. "She's a friend of my lawyer," I said. "She hired you to sell her house 3 weeks ago." Jessica's jaw tightened. So this was a setup. "Jesus Christ, Helen, you set me up." "I gave you an opportunity to prove me wrong," I corrected. "I hoped you wouldn't take anything. I prayed you wouldn't. But you did." "I have no idea what you're talking about." "The Cartier watch, the one that was on the dresser in the master bedroom. It's gone, Jessica. And you're the only person who was alone in that room during Sunday's open house." She laughed, but it was a brittle sound. "You think I stole a watch? Based on what evidence? It could have been anyone. A visitor, another agent. Margaret herself might have moved it." "Margaret photographed everything in that house," I interrupted. "Serial numbers, receipts, timestamps. She has proof the watch was there Sunday morning. And she has testimony from a witness that you were the only person who entered that bedroom alone." I paused. "And when the police search this house, I'm guessing they'll find more than just that watch." Jessica's face went very still. "You called the police." "Not yet, but Richard is calling them this afternoon." "Unless," I trailed off. "Unless what?" Her voice was sharp. "Unless you come clean. Tell Michael everything. Return what you've stolen. Make this right before it destroys him." She stared at me for a long moment, and I saw about a dozen different emotions cross her face. Fear, rage, calculation, desperation. Then something in her seemed to break. She pulled out one of the bar stools and sat down heavily, her perfect posture collapsing. "You have no idea what it's like," she said quietly. "Growing up with nothing. Wearing clothes from Goodwill while other girls wore designer jeans. Living in a trailer park while other kids lived in real houses. Being invisible, being nobody. So, you decided to steal your way into a different life, I said. I decided to take what I deserved. She looked up at me, and her eyes were red-rimmed. Do you know what it's like to show million-dollar houses to people who have everything? To watch them buy properties they'll barely live in, collect things they'll barely use? They don't appreciate any of it. They don't even notice when something's missing. That doesn't make it right. Right? She laughed bitterly. What's right about a world where some people have 10 designer coats and other people have none? What's right about wealth distributed so unevenly that I can work 80 hours a week and still barely afford the lifestyle I'm selling? So you steal from your clients. You abuse their trust. I take what they won't miss, she corrected, and I use it to build the life Michael and I deserve. A nice house, nice things, respect. Do you think he'd have married me if I was still that girl from the trailer park? Do you think he'd look at me the way he does if I didn't present well, if I didn't fit into his world? My son fell in love with you, not your clothes. She shook her head. You really believe that, don't you? That love is pure and simple and not affected by money or status or how you look. But it's not true, Helen. People love the versions of us we show them, and I showed Michael the best possible version of myself, the version those stolen things helped me create. I sat down on the stool across from her. Does he know any of it? No. Her voice was small. He thinks I'm good at sales, good at finding deals. He believes the stories I tell him because he wants to believe them, because it's easier than asking hard questions. We sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the quiet hum of the refrigerator. What happens now? Jessica asked finally. That depends on you, I said. You can confess before the police get involved, return everything you've taken, face consequences, or you can wait for them to find the evidence, and the consequences will be much worse. If I confess, I'll lose my license, probably face charges, maybe jail time. She looked around at her beautiful kitchen, her perfect house. I'll lose everything. You'll lose more if you don't, I said, and Michael will be destroyed either way. But at least if you're honest now, if you take responsibility, there's a chance he'll eventually forgive you. A chance you can rebuild some kind of life, even if it's smaller than this one. Jessica's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against the marble countertop. He'll leave me. Maybe, I said honestly. Or maybe he'll stand by you. But he deserves the truth. She closed her eyes. I need to think. You have until 6 o'clock tonight, I said, standing up. That's when Richard is making the call. If you want to tell Michael yourself, tell him before then. I walked to the door and let myself out, leaving Jessica sitting alone in her perfect kitchen, in her perfect house, surrounded by all the beautiful things she'd stolen from other people's lives. When I got home, there was a voice message from Richard. Margaret found something else, he said, hidden in Jessica's car during the open house. Security footage from a neighbor's camera. Jessica putting something in her trunk. The police will want to see it. Call me when you can. The net was closing. There was no escape now. No way for Jessica to explain away what she'd done. I sat in my living room as the afternoon light faded, waiting for my phone to ring, waiting to hear my son's voice, broken and confused, asking me how I could have known and why I hadn't warned him sooner. At 7:15, Michael called. I could hear it in the first syllable of Mom. Everything had changed. She told me, he said, his voice hollow. Everything. And then the police came. They have a warrant. They're searching our house right now, and Jessica is... He broke down, the sound of his sobbing like something tearing. Mom? I don't understand. I don't understand any of this. I know, sweetheart, I said, my own tears falling. Come home. Come here. We'll figure it out together. Everything's a lie, he whispered. Our whole life. Everything. Not everything, I said firmly. You're not a lie. Your goodness isn't a lie. Your father's love wasn't a lie. My love isn't a lie. The rest, we'll deal with the rest. He showed up at my door 40 minutes later, and he looked like a stranger, pale, hollow-eyed, aged a decade in a single afternoon. I held him the way I used to when he was small, when the world hurt him, and only his mother could make it better. Except this time, I couldn't make it better. I could only hold him while he broke apart, and hope that someday, somehow, he'd find a way to put himself back together. The next few weeks passed in a blur of lawyers and police statements and phone calls with numbers I didn't recognize. Jessica was arrested and charged with multiple counts of theft and fraud. The police search of her house had turned up more than anyone expected. Designer clothes with tags still attached, jewelry hidden in false bottom drawers, handbags stuffed in the back of her closet still wrapped in their dust bags. 37 items total, worth over $200,000, all stolen from clients she'd been hired to help. Richard told me it could have been worse. "She's cooperating," he said. "Gave them names, dates, everything. The DA might offer a plea deal, reduce charges in exchange for restitution and testimony if any of the victims want to press civil suits." "What does that mean for her?" I asked. "Probably 18 months to 3 years, depending on the judge. Maybe probation if she's lucky. But her real estate license is gone. Her career is over. And Michael," he trailed off because we both knew Michael's life had imploded too. "My son moved back into his childhood bedroom 2 days after Jessica's arrest. He couldn't stay in that house," he said. "Couldn't sleep in the bed they'd shared. Couldn't look at the things she'd surrounded them with. Couldn't breathe in spaces that smelled like her perfume and her lies. He was on leave from school, stress leave they called it, though everyone knew what had really happened. The story had made the local news. Sacramento real estate agent arrested in theft ring. Jessica's face was on television, that professional headshot from her company website, smiling and confident. The irony was crushing. Michael barely spoke for the first week. He'd sit at the kitchen table where he used to do his homework as a teenager, staring at nothing, drinking coffee that went cold because he forgot it was there. Sometimes I'd hear him crying in his room late at night. Muffled sounds he tried to hide, but couldn't quite manage. I didn't push him to talk. I just made sure there was food he'd eat, kept the house quiet, let him know I was there if he needed me. Thomas would have known what to say, I thought. Thomas always knew how to reach Michael when he withdrew into himself. But Thomas was gone, and I was doing the best I could. It was Margaret Whitmore who finally helped, oddly enough. She called me on a Thursday morning, 3 weeks after everything fell apart. "How's your son?" she asked, her voice gentle. "Broken," I said honestly. "I'd like to meet him," she said. "If he's willing, I think it might help." I was skeptical, but I asked Michael anyway. To my surprise, he agreed. Maybe he needed to see the woman whose trap had caught his wife. Maybe he needed to understand the full scope of what Jessica had done. Or maybe he was just so numb that it didn't matter anymore. Margaret came to my house on Saturday afternoon. She was a small woman, barely 5 feet tall, with white hair cut in a neat bob and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. She brought tea cookies from a bakery downtown and acted like this was just a pleasant social visit. We sat in my living room, the 3 of us, and for a long moment nobody spoke. Then Margaret set down her teacup and looked directly at Michael. "Your mother didn't want to do this," she said. "Setting the trap, I mean. She fought Richard on it for 2 days. She was terrified of hurting you." Michael's eyes filled with tears. "She should have told me sooner, before it got this far." "Would you have believed her?" Margaret asked gently. "Without proof? When your wife was crying and telling you your mother was confused or jealous or whatever story she spun?" He shook his head slowly. "No, I wouldn't have. That's why we had to do it the way we did," Margaret said. "Not to hurt you, but to save you. Because, sweetheart, if Jessica hadn't been caught now, she would have kept going. And eventually, she would have been caught anyway. But by then, you might have been implicated. Your name on bank accounts? Your fingerprints in the house? The law doesn't always distinguish between the thief and the spouse who didn't ask enough questions." "I should have known," Michael said, his voice breaking. "I lived with her. I should have seen it." "Why?" I asked quietly. "Why should you have seen it when she spent years perfecting her disguise? When she lied to professional investigators, to her employers, to everyone? Because I'm supposed to know the person I married," he said. "I'm supposed to understand them, love them. How could I love someone I didn't even know?" Margaret leaned forward. "Let me tell you something about my late husband, Richard. We were married for 51 years, and about 10 years ago, I discovered he'd been having an affair with his dental hygienist for 3 years. 3 years. I had no idea. None." She smiled sadly. "I knew everything about that man, how he took his coffee, what jokes made him laugh, the way he tied his shoes. But I didn't know he was capable of that kind of betrayal. And it wasn't because I was stupid or blind. It was because he was very, very good at hiding it." "What did you do?" Michael asked. "I forgave him," she said simply. "Not right away. It took time and therapy and a lot of hard conversations. But I forgave him because I realized that people are complicated. They contain multitudes, as the poet said. The man who loved me and the man who betrayed me were the same person. And I had to decide which parts of him I wanted to remember, which parts defined our life together. Did you ever trust him again? Michael's voice was so young, so lost. Not the same way, Margaret admitted, but different. Better, maybe. More realistic. I stopped believing in perfect love and started believing in real love. The kind that survives mistakes and scars and hard truths. She stayed for another hour, telling stories about her marriage, about forgiveness and moving forward and learning to live with disappointment without letting it destroy you. When she left, she hugged Michael like he was her own son. "You're going to be okay," she told him. "It doesn't feel like it now, but you will be." After she was gone, Michael and I sat together on the couch, not talking, just existing in the same space. It was dark outside, the autumn evening settling over Sacramento like a blanket. "I filed for divorce," Michael said finally. "My lawyer says it'll take about 6 months. How do you feel about that?" He thought for a long time. "Relieved," he said, "and guilty for feeling relieved, and sad, and angry, and grateful she told me the truth before the police told me, and..." He laughed without humor. "Everything. I feel everything." "That's normal," I said. "I keep thinking about all the times she came home with something new. A coat, a watch, a bracelet. And she'd have this story about finding it on sale or getting it as a gift from a client. And I'd believe her because, why wouldn't I? Because I trusted her. Because I loved her." He turned to look at me. "When did you know? Really know? Not just suspect?" "At the dry cleaners," I said, "when Mr. Chen told me about the other women calling. Before that, I had doubts. Small ones, the kind you push away because you don't want to be that person, the suspicious one, the one who ruins everything by asking too many questions." "Do you think I pushed away doubts too?" he asked. I considered lying, softening it, but he deserved the truth. Maybe. Or maybe she was just that good at hiding. Either way, you weren't responsible for her choices. She made them. She decided to steal, to lie, to build a life on other people's belongings. "I loved her," he said quietly. "I know you did. Part of me still does. Is that crazy?" "No," I said. "It's human." The divorce was finalized in April. Jessica pleaded guilty to 15 counts of grand theft and received 2 years in county jail, plus 5 years probation and a mandate to pay restitution to her victims. Michael didn't attend the sentencing. He said he'd said everything he needed to say in the letter he'd written for the judge, a letter about betrayal and grief and the long process of learning to trust himself again. By then, he'd returned to teaching. His principal had been understanding, his students welcoming. Life had started moving forward in the way it does, slowly and painfully, but moving nonetheless. One evening in May, almost 7 months after that afternoon at the dry cleaners, Michael and I were having dinner on my back patio. The roses Thomas had planted years ago were blooming, filling the air with their sweet scent. Michael was telling me about one of his students who'd finally understood Shakespeare after months of struggle, and his face was animated in a way it hadn't been in a long time. "You're healing," I said when he paused. He smiled, and it reached his eyes. "Yeah, I think I am. Slowly. Your father would be proud of you," I said. "The way you've handled all of this. The way you've kept going. I had a good example," he said, looking at me. "You could have said, 'I told you so' 100 times. You could have been angry with me for not believing you. But you weren't. You're my son," I said simply. "That doesn't come with conditions." We sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the neighborhood I'd called home for 40 years. The same trees, the same houses, the same street, but everything different now. Everything changed. "Mom," Michael said after a while, "thank you for seeing what I couldn't see, for doing what needed to be done even when it cost you, for," he swallowed hard, "for loving me enough to risk losing me." I reached across the table and took his hand. "I'll always risk everything for you. That's what mothers do." The truth had broken everything, just like I'd feared. But underneath the breaking, we'd found something stronger. A relationship built on honesty instead of comfort, on reality instead of wishful thinking. It wasn't the family I'd imagined when Michael first brought Jessica home, but it was real, and real was enough. What would you have done in my situation? Have you ever faced something like this in your own family, where telling the truth meant risking everything? Please share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to tell me what city you're watching from. Thank you so much for listening until the very end. This is Letters to Helen, and I'll see you in the next story.